Artisans of Fashion podcast, empowering artisans, preserving traditions, and reviving beauty.
Welcome to the Artisans of Fashion podcast. My name is Lalita Lowe. Today I introduce you to Kudrat Makkar, founder and creative director of Mastani, a luxury, ethically made and sustainable women's wear label. Through her work, Kudrat wanted to have a connection with her native India in a way she could give back. Her vision was to meld traditional techniques in a modern way through exceptional artisanal clothing. These handmade traditional techniques are inherited by artisans from her ancestors. The Mastani artisans are masters in embellishment, hand-looming, structure and contemporary silhouettes. They bring to life the design ethos, which is to blend tradition and modernity, timelessness and uniqueness. Welcome, Kudrat. So thank you, Kudrat, for welcoming me into your beautiful boutique today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So last night I was thinking about Mastani, and what really stood out for me were three things that are very unique about Mastani: the textiles and the fabrication, the silhouettes, and of course the artisans that you work with, the artisanship behind your brand, which is everything.
Yes.
So firstly, tell me about your personal inspiration behind the brand Mastani and your influences and your vision.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure. This is my first podcast, so it's always, I'm nervous, but I think I'll be fine. Mastani, I started the journey almost, I would say, 6 years ago. And personal inspiration, I always wanted to be in fashion, but never in mainstream fashion. That was never the idea. I wanted to, sort of show the unique side of my culture and my heritage, but through garments, through the artisanal work, through the beautiful, textiles and the art, which sort of stems out of India. And I only realized when I moved to Australia that there's a lot missing here, that we really, a lot of the clientele or a lot of my friends at that time had no idea something like that can happen. And I thought, wow, it's beautiful. And I was studying architecture, so I actually never officially studied fashion. And I think the forms and the sculptures and the art of architecture, that sort of trained me to become a designer in a way. I still don't call myself a traditional fashion designer. I don't think so. I've still got it. But I really think I am, the whole purpose is to, you can still have beautiful clothes and really have beautiful outfits, but can still be quite sustainable and ethical and have artisanal, touch to it. So, yes, that was, I would say, personal inspiration was, growing up, going to the tailors and the embroiders with my mom and, getting things made. They would measure us and they'll make it for us. And you would think, here when I came to Australia, I thought, wow, it's, only if you're getting married, or, you really want to do something really couture, you would then get measured. Otherwise, nobody measures you here. Even, basic alterations can sometimes become a nightmare. So I thought, I need to do something to bring or show the world that side of India, that, it is nothing, it's not impossible. We have tailors in every little town. We've got it in every little street, and every area has a tailor. It's just a thing. And when you're getting married, the tailor would bring the sewing machine to your house, and everybody who's attending would come in and say, can you fix this for me, and can you do that for me, and can literally make dresses for you on the spot. So it's and then still keeping it very modern, still keeping it aesthetically possible for my clientele for my the Mastani women to actually wear it to events and to wear it to their day-to-day life. So practicality was really important, but the idea was to meld the traditional heritage cultural side of things with the modern women.
Beautiful. And so did you immediately, when you thought about setting up the brand, did you immediately think of going to the artisans in India to do what you're doing, or was that a part of the process?
I think it was the whole idea was, why am I doing it? I think as a person, I always question with a raft of designers, like, is there a need of another women's wear designer? Like, there's a lot of beautiful things people are doing. There's a lot of amazing designers here. So what am I going to do is there a gap? What's the purpose of me having a brand or having a women's wear label? Do I need to add to another pile of, unwanted clothes? No. So I think I really had that strong answer at that time that I want to do it, and I want to do something very unique and something which is, especially in an Australian market, unfortunately there's so much synthetic and there's so much fast fashion and mass production happening. Also, before I started Mastani, when I was a student in Australia, I saw incoming massive, big mass sellers, and it was a massive change happening in the whole fashion landscape, with the big giants coming into Australia. And I thought, and Australian designers were doing great, but I thought there is still something missing. And I had seen some of it already happening probably in the US and in the UK, a little bit in the UAE, but I really couldn't, other than one or two designers, I don't think so there was anyone else actually working with artisans, loomers, and, anything to do with hand, because it was just not happening. So I think my first step, before I even thought it was going to be, this elevated brand, luxury women's wear brand, was what artisans I want to work with, what do I want to show the world, or why do I need to, I'm not going to be buying, off the run fabrics and make things and just put them in a store. And that's where my journey started with Artisans, and I think that's where I learned so much that it's been 6 years I'm doing it, but I still sometimes think there's so much to do, there's so much to see, and there's so much to produce in a way, and so much art to show. So I've probably only used 20% of the whole, and there's techniques back in India. And I started with mainly my hand-loomed silk. I think that was where I was awestruck with the beauty of how you can actually make a fabric by hand and have no electricity used, and you sort of support the whole family unit. It's not only working with a supplier, you're basically dealing with families, and you only find it out once you actually get there and research and go and see the loomers and actually meet the loomers rather than meeting the retailers, because there are retailers who are selling hand-loomed fabrics, but then you must visit the loomers to understand the whole idea.
I can't imagine what that was like for you starting, meeting these people, and how did you decide, who you would work with and what techniques you would begin with?
Yeah, I think it was a very interesting process. Difficult at times, even though it feels like, I'm from India, I would understand, and I would I can say things, or I can speak the language. I was as foreign as anyone else, because I can only speak 2 languages, and we have so many, probably, like, I don't even know how many dialects we have. Yeah. We have 26 different states, so most of us speak a different language. And then within the states, everybody has a different dialect as well. So the first place I visited was Varanasi. That's where my handloom comes from. And it's like the whole Varanasi, that's why the fabric itself, and why I went to Varanasi was because when I was growing up, my mom used to wear a lot of Banarsi saris, so we call it Banarsi, because it was actually called as Banaras before the Britishers came to India, and they changed Banaras to Varanasi. But we used to call it Banarsi saris, Banarsi this and Banarsi. And I was like, oh, I have to go to Banaras. I have to go to Banaras and see. And it was like magic. It's that's where the Ganges are as well. So it's got a beauty about itself. It's just mind blowing, that city. But also then when you get into the little rural areas close to the main city, and it's streets full of hand loomers. So every house on a street probably you could hear the sound. Chick, 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 chick. It's because they're actually looming. And it's all done by hand. It's all done within family units. The wife's part of it. Probably the wife does the hand dyeing, or the mom does the separates all the loom and threads, and then hand dyes it. And then because it's a very physical sort of job. Usually the men actually physically loom the fabric, because you need a lot of strength. The fabric needs to be so tight that if it's not tight, you really can't build it. Right. So that strength is required. Although it's changing, I have seen women doing that as well now, but it is quite a painstaking thing. It's not something you press a button and it's done. Right. And then usually the brothers would do it together, or the dad and the sons are doing it together. So the men are usually, doing the main looming, but then the women help in processing the whole, the journey of where, making the holes in the, we call it the kaka, which is basically how they design that, what is going to come on the loom.
It's like a pattern.
It is like a pattern, basically. And so that was my first city I went, and I was like, I have to use, and you could do simple, you can just do plain silk satins, or you could do plain silks. You could do plain tussar silks, you could do few the Ari silks. So there's few different ways you can do silks with a hand loom, but then we could also do jacquards. So you could do patterns, you can do floral patterns, geometric patterns. And I think that's where I got really nervous, that how I'm going to make it modern, how am I going to actually put it on Western clothes? Because every time you go to a loomer and you see what work they have done, it's very traditional. It's mainly focusing on the traditional market. It's mainly focusing, for saris or for Indian outfits. And I was like, how do I? And then initially, I actually bought few saris, and then I cut them, and then I made garments out of it. And I said, oh, it looks beautiful, but is there market for this? Probably not. Yes, a little bit. I was thinking more Australia, because this is where I was going to sell it. And so the journey of, working with artisans started. I, ended up, after visiting so many of them, I really, wanted someone who understood what I was trying to do, and, not just, because they do get a lot of foreigners, mind you, they do get a lot of designers, but a lot of them give up because it's a hard process to actually, changing what they're trying to do, or, trying to teach them, because they've been doing it for generations. It's not that they've just learned an art. It's probably been in their family for 10 generations, probably even more sometimes. And there's certain families known in all different regions for certain tasks, or certain artisanal work. Like in Bhuj, there's the Khatri family. They do ajrak. So ajrak is a form of hand block printing, and it's called as Ajrakpur. That whole area is named after the art. But then that Khatri family is so known that because the Khatris only do that sort of block printing. There's probably other people doing it now, but traditionally, from ever since they remember their generations, they've been doing that. So it's fascinating, because it's their life. It's part of what they do in and out. It's not something they have just learned. So to change what they've been doing for hundreds of years, or what they've been taught by their ancestors, not the art form, but also making it modern in a way that it's and I think they all want to do it, but it's just that sort of training them or educating them with the wealth of sort of knowledge you gain as a Westerner. How do you then put it towards the art that it becomes it's not only for the Indian market, but it's for the world. And I think they all have that hunger in them. They want it to, they want it to go outside of India. They want other people to wear it, and so they're happy to do it. But it's a very slow process. You can not just suddenly and go and say, okay, this is what I want to do. Can you just do it for me? You have to sort of work with them and train them, and slowly then they come back with ideas and say, oh, this is going to look stunning. And they sometimes don't trust the process, or they don't trust how it's going to look in the end. And especially with the colors, they're like, oh my God, this is so light. This because they are so used to using the bright colors and everything. Like, this looks dead. There's no way anyone would want to wear it. It's sad. I'm like, it's not. This is what we like wearing. When we are overseas, we it's not only about colors, it's something we want to wear day to day. Or, when I tell them I'm doing a black jacquard, they're like, what? Why would somebody do? But, it's changing. It's changing a lot, with a lot of Indian designers, quite advanced in what they are doing, or what their clients require. It's getting easier for people like me, who go back. And whereas, when I started 6-7 years ago, the art was there, the artisans were there, but that sort of interpretation of traditional melding with the modern was really sort of a hard task. But I think with years of working with them, and with my handloom silks, I use them every collection, so it's much easier. Forcing them to do solids as well, and not just the patterns, which they find really boring, because they're like, oh, why do you need to wear that? Like, what's the purpose? They think it's Banarsi, so it needs to have some sort of Banarsi element to it. But I still tell them, at least the technique's there. You're still doing it all by hand. It's just that it's easier for people who work every day, or go to 9 to 5 to an office, or or rewear it. So they do understand it now.
And so, even though they're resistant maybe in the beginning to this innovative process, it sounds like they're getting a lot out of it. And they're coming along with you.
Yes, like I said, it's a journey, and they love it. They are, they absolutely, especially love it once the garment is fully finished and it's done. They can't believe it, that, it's actually made into this beautiful blazer, or, it's actually going on a runway, or it's, I think they can't imagine the patterns they're being done into. And now it's interesting. The other day I'm getting something developed, and my artisan was like, can you tell me, what are you going to use it on? What are you going to make out of it? And I'm like, wow, that has never come before. Why do you want to know that? Wow. Because it's like, I want to imagine it, and then I want to loom it, thinking about that, it's going to be a pant. Or it's going to, so it's an evolution, because they'll just do the fabric, they'll make the loom, they'll do the hand looming, how many meters do you need, this is going to take time, it usually takes a lot of time, so you really need to start a year in advance. You can't just say, I need something next day, or in 3 days or 4 days, because they have to prepare the whole the whole loom for that. And there's two things, they prepare and they work so hard for it, right? But then they can't make a lot of it either, because it takes a lot of time. It's painstaking. So there's that spending all this time to prepare it, and then only making probably 40 meters or 50 meters of it. Whereas, once the loom's set up, you can go back and say, I really want to do the same pattern, but can we change the colors this time? Or can we, they become like Mastani patterns then. And then they sort of become our archive of the loom, and the loomers keep it. So they have that, and then when I need something, or I go back and say, I did this a few years ago, I want to redo it, and I want to do it in this collection. But yeah, I think they have really, it's much easier for me to do it now. I can give them a very vague idea, or send them a picture of my, a sketch or something, and they're pretty good at actually doing it now, rather than spoon feeding, which I had to do originally. And they come up with all the pale colors and all the the sort of, they call it the English colors. They're like, they're too English. So yes, it is a journey, but I think it's beautiful, because it's not only It's not only getting a fabric done. It's like it's that relationship and that sort of like the support you give to your artisans and the support they give to you, and it's on a very personal level. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I can see that you're growing together in a way. So that the longer you're working together, the more you can understand each other. And who knows what you can innovate and create from there.
That's true. That's very true. It is like I say I'm nothing without my artisans. If they're not there, Mastani is not possible. But I think also for them it's a very proud moment that there was a recent exhibition in Melbourne, and when there's some of the artisans who came in, they said we've never seen a standalone Indian designer in a Western country with their own boutique. So it was a very proud moment for them. And then on top of that, actually selling handloom and selling, but the outlook of it is quite modern still, that, somebody who walks in, they don't feel like, oh, I've entered into an Indian store or something very traditional. So the roots are there. I always say, the roots of Mastani are in India, the tradition. But yes, probably the branches are quite modern. So it's,
you can definitely feel that.
yes. So I think they were really proud that we've never seen any Indian doing it on this scale, and outside of India. There's obviously a lot of Indian designers who've got their own boutiques and their own flagship stores, but they said we've not seen it happening anywhere else. There might be brands who are stocked in different department stores, but having your own store, it's and I think that sort of was always the idea to show the artisanal side of things. But for people, the tactile nature of the fabric, I think it's so important for me that my clients and my customers and the Mastani women touch it and feel it. Then it doesn't justify when you just have pictures of it online, or you really can't really see. And they all, even though they're done by hand, they still feel quite luxe. And I think that's another thing I have to I keep educating myself on, is how do I still make it feel really luxurious. The fabrics are very important. Yes, it's probably the most important thing for me, but it needs to still be made really well. And that's where my atelier comes in. I make everything in-house back in India, and it's a small team of between 16 to 20, my tailors, my cutting masters, my hand embroiders. So I do all my hand embroideries in-house. And they and then training them to also do the French seams, and how do you finish the product, and how do you how does it sit on you. It's not only you cut it and you make it. It starts from the fabric, but then doing your patterns and grading it in the right way and making sure there's as less wastage as possible, because we are still trying to be very sustainable. And if there is wastage, what do we do with the wastage? We use a lot of our wastage, and we make garment bags out of it. We patchwork some of it. We use it to do the pipings of all of the garment bags. And I have recently, for my next collection, I have partnered with two very young girls from Delhi, and they have this beautiful new idea of hand-looming, but hand-looming your waist. So they actually collect your waist. So I have sent 90 kilos of my waist from my previous collections.
So you've been saving it up.
We always save it. We never get rid of our waste. So all our waste is still there. So we've got a room full of stuff which has scraps in it, because when you cut a garment, you would have scraps. There's no way. And we try to repurpose it as much as we can. And then when I found out about them, I was like, it's like life changing, because you don't know what to do with it. You can try, we do the garment bags, we do bags for the shoes, we do things where we could reuse that whole thing. at times when, it's slow, it's, when, especially during COVID, when we had, I had to retain my team. We were all closed here. There were obviously not as many sales as you could imagine. But my team was so bored. What do we do now? What do we do now? So I said, okay, let's make garment bags. Let's make something so that, you are employed and you are, there's something for you to do rather than not doing anything. So these wonderful girls, they collect all your, so you basically send them your waste, and they've got this team who actually separates the whole waste.
Okay, so like colors, separating colors.
Exactly, they separate colors. They also separate, for example, your silks to your jacquards, to your, so they'll separate, I think, in few different ways. Once that's done, they then start doing small, like they'll do a loom, and they'll prepare a loom with 2 or 3 different ideas. And then, for example, I use a lot of silk organza. So they'll then re-loom the waist in a way to create a brand new fabric. And it's fascinating. They have evolved a lot since they started. They started a few years ago as well. And it's just beautiful when you see how the waist, and also because it's from your previous collection, so it's your colors, right? Because that's what you've already used. And so I'm doing 1 or 2 different sort of types of fabrics from them, and it's all hand loomed, which is another thing. So they're not just repurposing your fabric by changing it or processing it, or, which you can now. And sometimes that's what I'm like, when it says it's recycled polyester, for example, it's probably worse than the normal polyester because the chemical process makes it even worse. You don't understand. Yes, probably it is a recycled fabric. Yes, you probably would have used waste of something, but you've then processed it so much that you've probably ended up in the waterways, and from an electricity perspective, it isn't that sustainable. So they don't do any processing at all. It's literally your own fabric. They do offer you to add another filler in it. For example, they'll say, I think we should add a bit more cotton fabric, or we should add little bit of zari, for example, if you want. Because end of the day, you really need to then still make our garments out of it. And it needs to have that luxe feel to it. So, we could add things to it, but 90% of it is your own waste, the waste you've collected over the years. So yes, I think I think that would change the whole, if people start doing that. So, and it's hand loomed again, and it's beautiful. So it's like basically re-looming your hand loomed fabric, which no one's done before. And there's a lot of talent, and these girls don't have any background in, in like ancestral loomers. They're young guns, basically, from fashion backgrounds, and then they've got loomers who they've employed who does the looming for them. And
so they're the experts in what will work, what won't work.
Yes, correct. And they'll say this is not going to work, or this is too heavy, or it's not going to be possible for us to actually hand loom it. But then basically the way they've set up their looms is they can actually loom anything. They can loom out of whatever waste. They could also do it, because I was like, so how big the scraps need to be? So do we? She said, you don't worry about that. Just send us everything you have. Doesn't matter small, large, because then they also separate it and make threads out of it, and then they do the whole.
So intensive.
It is intensive, but it is very special.
It's also honouring the artisans, the people that you've already worked with.
Yes, you're not just because I used to feel.
Time and effort.
True, and the hours, and it used to make me feel, I was like, I can't believe, yes, it's expensive is one thing, but also the hard work and the sweat and the tears which have gone in. And once the garment's made, there's no way it's, as when we do the patterns, and that's one thing which I do electronically is the patterns, because there's so much. You can save so much of your fabric when you're doing. I originally started with hand making all the patterns, so we still do a bit of hand, but then it sort of gets graded in a way that you don't waste anything. You maximize the whole width of the fabric. It's just, but you still doesn't matter. When you're doing an arm, or when there's a little curve coming, you would have a bit which is a waste. And so yes, so I think it's just again for us as well, everyday learning, everyday educating our own selves and saying, how do we get better at it? Even if you're doing a little bit, I say, is better than doing nothing. I probably am still very far away from, being vertically all sustainable, because, there are things, your hands are tied, and as much as you want to do it, but it's not in your control, because, you can't manufacture everything. You do have to deal with suppliers, especially if you want your end product to be really high end. So, we try, and I think that's another part of my job where I just research. I research the hell out of people. Who does what? Where do I find this? And I'm like, I'm sure there's someone in the world who's doing this. I'm sure there's someone in the world who does these buttons, or, not plastic buttons, or, even like, recycled, or where do I find them? So I think it's all researching.
You were quoted in CEO magazine as saying that Mastani is characterised by strength and beauty, with the ideology that embraces cultural heritage and contemporary fashion influences, and that your aim is to inspire confidence and empower women to express the multifaceted modern female identity. So that's beautifully captured. And I want to lead into empowering women. Basically, I think it's just this is the time.
Yeah.
The UN has said that women's economic empowerment is central to realising women's rights and gender equality, and that empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are key to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So, how have you seen this firsthand as a result of working with female artisans in India, and how does Mastani support these women and their children and their families and community? How does the work that they're doing support their families and empowerment?
I think it's a great question, and it's very sort of in time. I think it's high time, as anyone living in India, doesn't matter, anyone living in a Western country, in Australia, in the UK, in the US, I think we all know it, women are no less. I think anyone who doesn't want to agree with that, they're living under the rock. We are all, I don't think so there's anything a man can do and a woman can't do. So I think it's probably, growing up, we are two sisters, and my father is probably, he empowered us so much that we became a bit crazy, I think, both of us, like over-empowering us. That's what happened. And I think the things I'm doing or the things she's doing, it's because I think we have to give it to our father and, of course, our mother. I think my mother got married when she was 16, very young. She was, she had just finished her grade 12 and she got married. And I think her lack of, educating further or wanting to do things in her life, she really wanted us to do it for her. So I think that empowerment sort of started very early on for me. And, my father comes from a family of 10 siblings, with most of them having a lot of boys in the family. He would always tell us, you're no less, you're no less, you can do what they can do, or, my girls would be, allowed to do everything. And it was a big thing for us back in India, coming from a very conservative family, sending us to, the best schools, sending me to Australia to go to the University of Melbourne. I was technically the first one. We had all traveled, but no one had ever from, one of 40, 50 first cousins. I was the first one to actually go overseas and get educated. So a lot of empowerment like that, a lot of trust. Whereas, and the same place where I would see a lot of my friends or a lot of family where, the girls weren't allowed to do a lot of things or certain things. You can't do this, you can't wear this, you can't have your hair short, you can't wear skirts, you can't wax, you can't laser, you can't shave. Like a lot of those things. And, when you see that you are being allowed to do those things, or, you really can be yourself and you can say and speak your mind, which was the which was a massive thing. Girls are not meant to talk back, or you're. So I think for us that we never faced those things, and I think that's what sort of changed us. And we are what we are today, I think, because of my parents, because of their that push that girls, it's world is an oyster, you can do anything. And I think that idea stayed with me, and it's with me forever. And I'm so glad it's changing so much in India, especially in India, that families want their daughters to be much more educated even than their sons, because they've understood that if you educate one woman, you educate the whole family. And I think that it's taken a while, but because India has so much young population, there's so much fire in the girls, there's so much fire in the women, even not only just in the bigger cities, even in the rural areas, women have their own, with social media, with, the positives of social media, I would say, there's a lot of empowerment and, things girls want to do, and they want to get out of their villages and do things because they think, and they know their only way out is education. So I think education is something which has played a massive role in the change India is facing at the moment. Artisanally, I think there's a lot of women-led artisanal work where a lot of things only women can do, like the bandhani. The men don't do it because they've never done it, and they are dependent on the women of the house. So they are probably running the same business, but because it's so painstaking, they literally, the real way bandhani was done is they would take a mustard seed and they would tie the thread around it. So they'll put it inside a fabric, they'll tie it, and then they'll dip dye it. And then they'll leave it like that, and then they take the threads out, the mustard seeds fall off, and it leaves a pattern. And that's how
many mustard seeds.
Yes.
One fabric.
Yes. And that's the original way of doing it, because a mustard seed is so tiny that imagine then wrapping around it. And obviously the men don't do it. So there are a lot of things only women do in India, from a technical side of, or I would say the artisanal side of things.
What other artisanal?
There's the I work with a Mumbai-based women-led, but also only women organization who does all hand printing and hand painting and hand dyeing. And they do all sorts of new experiments, and they use these beautiful temple flowers they repurpose it, but they also use all natural dyes. They use all sorts of spices. They use madder. They use cinnamon sticks. They use onion, waste, and they then drive the colors from that. It's all naturally dyed. And I've done few collections with them. I've done a temple project where there's a very famous temple in Mumbai called as the Siddhivinayak temple, where millions of people go every day. But then they get offered a lot of flowers every day. That's what people take with them. But then
a lot of marigolds?
A lot of marigolds, a lot of roses, and a lot of marigolds. So what do you do with it once, because they're getting it every day in and out. So this organization partnered with them, and then they get all because every morning there's they get offered new flowers.
Wow. And they have to take them away.
They take them away, and then they have a system of how they do it. And then they use it and repurpose it to make dyes, but then also prints out of it. So they actually place roses, and then they steam the fabric with the roses in it, and it leaves this beautiful purple tinge to it.
And how special it's come from the temple?
It's a blessed fabric. I say it's like a blessing. So I actually had a bride, I think she was an abstract print painter, and she was getting married, and she just walked in, and we had the marigold story at that time. And I think one of our team members said, "Oh, this is done like this," and she's like, "I'm getting married in this. There's no way I'm getting married in anything else, because it's come from a temple, and it's so blessed, and it's the color tones I like. I want a bit of color, and it's got this really beautiful, like a creamy tone to it, but then with the yellow marigold sort of scattered all around." So she actually, we did a really beautiful gown for her, and she actually wore that to her wedding. So that's a good story, because
so much meaning.
There is a lot of meaning, and that's the whole purpose. I really think every garment we make, there's a story behind it. And with that, if people sort of understand and want to know that story, it sort of justifies the reason why I'm doing this. It's not meaningless. There's a lot of meaning and a lot of, hard work and a lot of techniques which go in it. So yes, a lot of women, there's like these young girls I told you from Delhi who are repurposing all the waste are all women as well. A lot of other techniques, I could say the shisha, the mirror embroideries, a lot of women do that as well.
It's so delicate.
It is quite delicate. It is painstaking again. A lot. So, and I think it's changed as in like now those times like where men would say, you don't have to work, you stay at home, we are the bread earners, you just look after the kids. I think it's changed because the women want to do it and they sort of prove themselves, and it's the whole landscape of women not doing things, or it's changed. They know their rights, they fight for it, and they are. So I think the UN is right. I actually think it's unfair how I was reading the other day that they've done some sort of research that one of the biggest consulting groups in the world is paying their employees 30% less than their male employees. And it's all clear, it's very transparent that you can see the change, and it's for the same roles. And it's in this age and time, I'm thinking, so is the Western world going backwards? Right? Yeah. Because it's, who does that, right? And it's actually unfortunate.
And it's equal.
It is equal. Yes, we do. And it is, apparently it was the Boston Consulting Group, which I read was one of them. And I was like, wow, that's surprising. Because you would imagine it's all equal, especially if you're doing the same job. I actually think women should be paid more. I'm not being biased, but I think with so many other hats we wear, with so many other things, especially with mums and the house staff, and there's a lot more which I think women do naturally, are always on, and naturally we do it, and emotionally as well. I think the way our hormones play, we should be paid more. But yeah, I hope it changes, and I hope it gets better than getting worse, because from an Indian perspective, I can tell you that we are sort of way ahead of the curve. I think women in India are really, they know what they want, and they're not shy, and they're not very, very strong. And, especially with education, I think they sort of get to where they know that this is their way out, and they really go full steam.
So coming back to your artisans, have you seen that working with them, how it's empowered the women that you work with?
Yes, of course. I think I had, and I think that was the whole idea. I love when I find someone who is, women-led or women's only, or, the artisans are, like mainly the work's done from the women and by the women. And, I think in a way it's very empowering for them, but also quite empowering for me, because I think as a woman, I really want to give back. And I think this is my way of doing it. And, if I can support them, and then in return, they are supporting their own families, what better way of, doing business and still, helping each other out. And so, yes, my artisans, a lot of artisans I work with who are women, focused, I make sure I work with them every collection. And, we do something like with my Mumbai artisans, we will do 1 or 2 different fabrics every collection. And I know they're all women, everybody in there, from their, flower collectors to their natural dyes they make, to actually then ruching it or tying it and drying it out. It's all done by women. So yes, I think it is very, very empowering for us, but for them, and especially for them to see then their work on an international stage or in another country.
What's possible.
Too. And I think it gives them that gives them a lot of empowerment, because they're like, oh, this is what I made or I hand dyed, and now it's getting sold in Australia. So I think that in itself is very empowering for them. sharing that with them. So, every time there's a garment, I would send them a picture and say, oh, so this is how we've hanged it. Or especially when I do my lookbook shoots or when I do a campaign and, if one of it is used in it, they can't believe it. Like, how beautifully it's then, the end product is very different to what, when they were doing it, they probably weren't even thinking this is what it's going to look like. So yes, very empowering. And I think it gives them that sort of energy to keep going and do more and more. So yes, I try as much as I can. And, it's sort of, it's very exciting when I find out that, the girls are going to do it or the women are going to do it. A lot of hand block printing is done by women as well. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's been, it is quite empowering. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I can imagine for future generations, for their children and their children's children, if they're feeling and being empowered in that way, what that means for the future.
That's it. And I think, like I said, probably it had already started, and you can now see it's like, you can see the seeds growing, and you can see how it has, women of, if you look at a woman from India 20 years ago to now, it's like the graph's gone up. It's just massive. Mm-hmm. And it's because of, like I said, mothers like my mom or, my sister, for example, because they have, so it sort of becomes a norm. It becomes like, oh, my mom was doing that, or my mom wants us to do it, or she's been, working, or she is also, part of that bread. I think breadwinner, because I think when we were growing up, it was very normal when women didn't work. If women didn't work, there was this thing in your sort of head that, the husbands usually work, and so it was. Yeah, and the women, we usually just look after the kids or the kitchen or the house, and the dad brings the money home, and then that's why he's the boss, right? Whereas I think it's changed. It's definitely changed. I think women are the boss now, and they make the rules, and husbands just live in their world. So
women continue leading.
Yes, that's it. And I think it's changed also because, the current president of India is a woman. We've had few women presidents, which is, probably the highest post you can get in India as a, so she is probably as famous as the prime minister, but also a lot of civil services, a lot of women in tech, a lot of women in engineering. Fashion is only a little part of it, but there's women doing, there's lawyers, there's doctors, scientists. We've had, when we had the last moon landing, the women, the people who were heading that project were all three women. Mm-hmm. So, it is quite, I think in that way, very empowering for girls to see that, and then in, wanting to do that or wanting to, for me as well, parents is a massive role, but also, growing up, I did see certain women when I was growing up and I was like, I wish I had become like that, or I really want to be successful like that person, or, I want to, be an entrepreneur, but I really want to, so I think you really have to have those examples around little girls, and then they definitely, want, that inspiration and that empowerment sort of starts very early on. But you're right, when, when they see their mothers or they see their sisters or they see someone else, they want to be like them. And it's changing, and it's really, I think it's a beautiful change, which, India is experiencing, and the crime rates go down. There's, a lot of benefit. Not only that, economically, it's really good for them. They then bring up their kids well. They send them to better schools. They, have a much better upbringing because, both the husband and wife are working. And it's good for the entire economy anyway, because there are things and there are skills and the soft skills, which I think a lot of men lack. But I think women, naturally, we have that. And I think it's better workplaces, it's better work environment when you have women in there.
You're taking a holistic view in a way. Yeah. So we're talking a little bit about the future. And if I come back to artisanal skills, what do you feel is the future for artisanship? Because I think many skills are at threat of being lost because the newer generations don't want to take on these older traditions.
Yes.
Maybe some do. So do you feel that artisanship will be around in, say, 100 years? Or what's your view from what you've seen?
I think we need more designers like me. I think there are a lot of designers interested in that space, but like we were talking before, it is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of it's financially not very viable when you're doing something at this scale. If you just do artisanal work and handmade things, I think definitely after 100 years, it's probably going to be better, because I think our artisans are evolving as well. Even though, yes, they're not, for example, I had an artist who does the hand-looming. He is now, he's a father. He's got, I think, teenage kids. And we were discussing this. I said, are your boys going to go into the same art? And he's like, one is really interested, the other not so. But other is in design, because I think it's because they are generational. Sometimes it's in their genes. I have a feeling like it's in genetically, they're like, so they used, as soon as they are born, all they hear is looming, right? So this is how they grow up. Some probably get fed up and they're like, we don't want to do it at all. But then a lot of them get into he's like, oh, but he's interested in design. So, he probably might not loom, but he'll still be part of the business. That how can we then evolve as loomers? So I think they're then sort of thinking, how can we educate our kids? So, they send a lot of them are getting into art. A lot of them are going to textile schools and actually learning a lot more than just looming. And then they bring back that wealth and use it in their traditional techniques. So that's what I was trying to do as a designer. But in now, because when they're going and actually attending fashion schools or textile schools, they're learning a lot more, because they know that, okay, we can experiment and we can do these things and we can modernize it in a way that you still keep the technique. It could be the design side of it. It could be how, what dyes you're using or what colors you're using, and how we can then sort of have another way of doing it. Because, you could loom in many different ways. There's different techniques you could loom as well. So I think it'll be there because of a lot of people who are still very interested in it. And I think the best thing about it is my generation, also the younger generation, is very much into sustainability. I think they know that for their kids or their grandkids, if they want to leave the environment and if they want to leave a good world, they really need to focus on these things. And I think that's the whole beauty of, the talk about sustainability. Yes, there's not enough happening, I agree, but I think even a little bit is helpful. And that's the future. I think in future, even my kids, with very little, 4-year-old, 8-year-old, they still talk about, the composting, and they talk about, and it's a lot to do with, education again, and schools, what they're taught that, you shouldn't use plastics, and so I think it's little things, little seeds you sort of put in their head, and then when they grow up, or when they're making life choices, or they're making choices like, oh, what do I wear, for example, in our case, I've got an option of buying from a mass produced, or I would rather save and get something. So I know this, the 18-year-olds, and sometimes we get because we are surrounded by really great schools, especially around when they have their year 12 formals, we do get young girls, and you can see that they understand it, and they are so well educated with, we want to make the right choices. Even they're actually educating their own mums. So I think it's a great sign.
That's terrific.
Yes, it is a great sign, because they're with social media again, some positives of it,
yeah.
that there is a lot of talk about it, and they really want to support ethical, sustainable, and they know that, we don't want to buy it from so and so because it's mass produced. It's produced, we don't even know where it's produced, or they're not paying their employees well, so they know that. So I think it's really bright, and I think also because they know the effect, especially the the fabrics and the manufacturing and all of that can actually have to the environment, and the waste, and rewearing things. I think that's another thing which I've seen the young generation is so proud of. I think when I was growing up, there was this whole thing about, there's an event, you buy a dress and that's it. No, and then you wear it, and then you never look at it for probably a few years, or you're like, oh, I've done it, I can just get rid of it. But when you invest in something made really well or high quality, it's very hard to part ways. And I have personally in my life, I have held on things. I'm a hoarder, one thing, but also I know that it's done by hand, or for example, a pashmina shawl my mom would have given me. I'd never use it probably, sometimes here and there, but I still love it. I want to pass it on to my daughter because I know how special it is. And I think that's the inherent value of textiles and fabrics we really want to impart and educate our customers and clients with as well. That the idea of Mastani always want, it's like a inherited piece. You want it to pass on, and because of that handmade beauty to it, and everything which is done by hand, how you appreciate it. And I think we appreciate a lot of my things because a lot of those were passed on. Like, it might be a sari, but I know how painstaking and how beautiful it is because it took probably hours and hours for the artisan to do it. So yes, definitely.
And I think the beauty about what you're doing is that you are, like you said, you're creating pieces that can be lifetime pieces. They can be worn to many different events or in your daily life, and also that you're paying attention to the fit and the overall making of the garment. So it does become a lifetime piece, and it is seen like that because it fits so well that you just want to keep wearing it. And it becomes one of those things that you just love and want to keep re-wearing.
That's true. And I think that's the whole purpose. That's why I'm not very trend focused. I think as a designer, it's not the right thing to say, but I'm not. I really don't look into trends that much. I really go with my gut and, I'll with my, also, the massive, beautiful runways, and I do like them, but I don't really drive my inspiration for my collections from them. I think I always drive a lot of the inspiration from what my artisans are doing, or my architecture background, the structure or how it's going to fit, or also ageless. I always think that a lot of my pieces are can be worn by a 20-year-old, but can also be worn by a 60 or 70-year-old. So I think that's where I really don't want to be a brand where it's sort of got a ticket of it's only for young girls, or it's only for the old women. We have a mix of. That's why somebody what's your demographic, and I'm like it varies. I've sold slip dresses to 18-year-old girls, but then I do get a lot of mums of brides and mums of grooms, and I do get grandmoms, and I get all these really successful lawyers and doctors in sort of that mix as well. So it is for sophisticated women, but it's also for a woman who wants to rewear things, or keep things in her wardrobe for longer, rather than just following the trends and this is in fashion, or I should buy it because it's so much in trend. So that was always the idea of the brand, and I think and that's the future. I think you don't want to have certain things just because they are in at the moment.
They don't last very long.
No, I think you get bored of it, and you'd rather have something you can wear after a few years. And there's so much I like. I'll take out something I've probably bought 8 years, 9 years ago, and I'm like, oh my god, it still looks nice as long as it fits me. It's buying those classic pieces always. It's much more longer lasting.
And I think the innovation that you're doing just with the fabrication and the artisans, that creates such a special, unique feel of each of your pieces. And I think that's what gives it that modernity that will be long-lasting as well. Yeah. So thank you so much for everything that we've spoken about, and thank you for Mastani. For the beautiful work that you're doing, your passion and commitment to the artisans, to developing beautiful pieces that last a long time. And I think it's so important what you're doing in today's world. So I really appreciate everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lilita. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Artisans of Fashion podcast, empowering artisans, preserving traditions, and reviving beauty. If you want to be a part of the Artisans of Fashion movement, please spread the word and tell your friends. We would also love to hear from you. Tell us about the artisans that you have found around the world. Please get in touch via the email or link provided in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Artisans of Fashion podcast, empowering artisans, preserving traditions, and reviving beauty.